Okay, so we're doing a deep dive today into the male advantage. Should be pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
You've, sent over some excerpts from this Kris Sturmey book, and
Yeah.
it seems like you're interested in what he has to say about men navigating the world today. So
Absolutely.
let's unpack it.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Yeah. So one of the first things that stood out to me, I mean, Sturmey, he kind of comes out swinging right from the beginning.
Yeah.
He talks about this idea of like male discontent.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that like modern society doesn't really cater to men's needs in the way that we might think that it does on the surface.
Yeah, and I think he brings up a lot of good points there. I mean, it's not to say that men have it harder or easier or anything like that, but I think just that there's this expectation placed on men in today's society, and it doesn't necessarily always line up with like what might actually make someone happy or fulfilled.
And he uses this example right at the beginning, and I don't know why this one kind of made me laugh, but it's like, so true.
Yeah.
He talks about the whole engagement ring tradition,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like the whole 3-month salary thing, like
Yeah.
how many guys you know
Yeah.
are really out there like, man, I can't wait to drop 3 months of my salary on this rock.
Right, right. I think it speaks to this idea that, men often end up kind of prioritizing these goals that they're told they should prioritize, right?
Right,
By society or by women even.
right,
And it's not necessarily something that's going to bring them happiness.
right. Or even that they really want to do. It's just sort of like this expectation, and you're kind of pressured into it.
Yeah, and if you don't, you're seen as like, oh, you're not a real man, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting point that he raises.
Yeah. And this idea that we're kind of like, we're told to play this certain role, but then we're not necessarily given the tools or the permission to actually like thrive
Yeah.
in that role. And so then a lot of guys just kind of end up feeling stuck, feeling unfulfilled.
Right, and I think that's what he's getting at with this whole male discontent thing is that
Yeah.
there's this feeling of like, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not happy.
What?
What's wrong with me? And really, it's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's that you're maybe not living in alignment with like your values and with what actually brings you joy.
And so then the question becomes like, okay, so how do we break out of that?
Right.
How do we kind of like shift that perspective? And it seems like Sturmey has some pretty unique perspectives on this whole idea of self-improvement. And one of the things that he talks about is this idea of the aggregation of marginal gains.
Yes, and this is such a good point, and it's something that I think is so often overlooked.
Yeah.
In the self-improvement space, especially like you go on Instagram and everyone's like, make $1 million in a day or whatever. But I think the real magic happens when you're just making these tiny little improvements consistently over time.
Right. And he uses this great analogy of like the decathlon athlete.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to be like the absolute best
Right.
at every single thing,
Yeah.
but you're consistently strong.
Right.
And so across the board, like you end up, taking home the goals or whatever it is.
It's not about winning one race, right? It's about winning the entire competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he talks about applying this to becoming like a 10, right?
Yeah.
He has this whole thing about like being a 10, but it's not just about looks, right?
Yeah, it's holistic. It's,
Right.
your fitness, your style, your,
Right.
social skills, your finance. Like, it's everything.
It's like that combined effort again.
Exactly.
It's like you're not just trying to win one single victory. It's like, what is the overall picture here?
Right.
And he actually cautions against focusing too much on just one area.
Oh, absolutely.
He's like, if you're too busy obsessing about like your height, for example, you're missing out on making progress in other areas of your life.
Totally. And he even quotes Randy Pausch in the book saying, like, you've got to play the hand you're dealt.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
that.
You can't control everything, but you can control how you approach the game.
And how you play it.
Exactly.
So, okay, we've got this societal pressure that Sturmey is arguing isn't really serving men.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this idea of this aggregation of marginal gains to become a 10,
Yeah.
this well-rounded individual.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like he's really kind of setting the stage for a very different definition of what it means to be like a successful man.
Totally. And that's where his social hierarchy model comes in. I think you'll find this really interesting.
Okay, let's hear it. So this social hierarchy model you mentioned, it gets interesting. Fill me in.
Yeah, so Sturmey, he lays out this hierarchy, and I think you'll find some of the things he says kind of surprising. Like, for example,
Okay.
he says that just being a good-looking man isn't as high-ranking as you might think.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought like in the hierarchy of like, the world we live in, that would be pretty high up there.
You'd think so, right? Like, conventionally attractive, you're at the top. But Sturmey, he argues that it's only one small piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so walk me through this hierarchy then. Where does it start?
So at the very bottom, he has, like, the general public, which, I mean, let's face it, that's most of us just, like, going about our daily lives, right?
Right.
Then you have the good-looking men, but like we said, they're not as high-ranking as you might think.
Interesting.
He says they can attract women below a certain level,
Okay.
but they often find themselves kind of stuck chasing after those above their level.
So it's like their sphere of influence is kind of limited?
Yeah, exactly. Like they might be locally popular, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the kind of success that Sturmey's describing.
Gotcha. So who's above the good-looking men then?
So above them, you have the 6s and 7s women, and this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
He makes the case that these women can attract almost any man globally.
Wow, okay.
They have a lot of options, but they're still drawn to those who rank higher on the hierarchy.
Okay, so then who are these like higher-ranking dudes? Then it seems like rich men play a pretty significant role in his model.
Oh, absolutely. Money talks, right?
Yeah.
He describes rich men as ranging from guys who are making like a good living to like seriously wealthy.
Okay.
And he argues that financial success is a major factor in social value.
Okay.
He even says that a guy with like an average physique can be seen as highly desirable if he's financially secure.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard those jokes, right?
What?
Personality goes a long way when you're driving a fancy car.
Exactly.
Seems like there's some truth to that, at least when it comes to like that initial attraction.
Right, and this all kind of ties into his Darwinian male theory,
Okay.
which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's this idea that the bar is constantly being raised for men, like what was once considered impressive is now just the baseline.
Oh, interesting.
Like he gives the example in the book of a factory worker from like 100 years ago would have been considered a great catch. But that same guy today might be completely overlooked by a successful independent woman.
So it's like this whole shift in societal expectations and just like the level of competition that men are facing today.
Exactly. Women have more options now.
Right.
And they're not settling.
So in this landscape where like the bar keeps getting higher, how do men even achieve this like outlier male status that Sturmey talks about?
So Sturmey says it's about mastering what he calls the big three: success, assets, and fitness.
The big three.
Yeah. So an outlier male is someone who's achieved a high level of success in his field.
Okay.
He's built up substantial assets, and he maintains an attractive physique.
Okay, so like the trifecta
Exactly.
of male desirability.
Yeah. But it's not enough to just have one or two of these things. He says you have to have all three, and you have to be well-rounded.
Okay.
Like he gives examples of outlier males who might not be conventionally attractive,
Okay.
but they excel in other areas, like they might be incredibly intelligent, or they might speak multiple languages, or they might have traveled the world.
So it's about building a life that's rare, something that's hard to replicate.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have the top tier of his hierarchy, the famous people and billionaires.
Right.
Now, Sturmey acknowledges that competing with them is tough.
Yeah, different ball game.
Right. They're on a whole other level of visibility and influence.
Right.
But here's the thing. He doesn't actually advocate for chasing fame or billionaire status.
Okay.
He says those things can come with a lot of stress and pressure, and that the outlier male life can actually be much more rewarding.
So it's about finding that balance between like, ambition and actually enjoying your life.
Exactly.
It's like you can have it all.
Exactly.
This fulfilling life, great career, high social value, but without like sacrificing your sanity or your soul.
Right. And to achieve that, Sturmey argues that men need to understand and really harness the power of their inherent masculinity.
Okay, I think we need to unpack that a little bit because Sturmey seems to have some pretty strong opinions on how society tells men to kind of suppress their natural traits.
Yeah.
He talks about how aggression is discouraged, testosterone is often viewed as this negative thing.
Yeah, and he argues that this suppression is actually detrimental to men.
Oh,
Like, he points to the success of high testosterone individuals in all sorts of fields: politics, sports, business. He even uses the example of Steve Jobs' like notoriously aggressive, demanding personality,
yeah.
but obviously achieved incredible things.
Right. So he's saying that these traditionally masculine traits, like when channeled correctly, can actually be like powerful drivers of success.
Exactly. He's not condoning toxic behavior or anything, but
Yeah.
he's saying that men shouldn't be ashamed of their natural drive and ambition.
Right.
Like embracing those qualities in a healthy, productive way is essential to achieving that outlier male status.
Almost like he's giving men permission to like be their most authentic selves and tap into their full potential, and stop apologizing for being strong and assertive. It's an interesting concept.
It is, and this kind of leads into another one of his intriguing concepts, the calendar effect.
Okay, the calendar effect.
Yeah, he challenges that traditional like work weekend structure.
Oh, interesting.
He argues that it can actually limit men's productivity.
Okay, I'm listening because, we're kind of conditioned to think of the weekend as like this sacred time off, right?
Exactly. And he's like, why?
Yeah.
Like, you want to work on your goals, you've got all this free time.
Right.
He uses the example of two men. One guy works the standard 9 to 5, takes the weekends off.
Okay.
The other guy uses those weekends to work on his side hustle, his dream, whatever it is.
Right.
And he calculates that over a period of years, that second man gains this massive amount of time and productivity.
And that extra time, according to Sturmey, can be the difference between achieving extraordinary success
Yeah.
and kind of staying stuck in mediocrity.
Totally. So it's about front-loading your effort, putting in the work now so you can have more freedom later.
So work hard now. Ignore the distractions, and then you can enjoy yourself later once you've achieved those goals.
Exactly. It's a different way of looking at work-life balance.
It is.
It's not about balance in every single moment. It's about like making strategic choices with your time.
Right. So you can ultimately build the life that you want.
Exactly. And this ties directly into his advice on resisting the temptation to chase women.
Okay. So
Sturmey argues that putting too much focus on relationships, especially early on, can really derail men from reaching their full potential.
okay.
He makes this point that beautiful women aren't rare,
Okay.
but outlier males are.
Interesting.
He says that men should focus on upgrading themselves, becoming so inherently desirable that women are naturally drawn to them.
Don't chase upgrade. I like that. Become the prize.
Yeah, be the prize, don't chase it.
Exactly.
It's a bold statement.
It is.
But I mean, it makes sense, right?
It does.
Like, take control of your time, your energy, your focus, and then you can achieve something truly exceptional. Right. And according to Sturmey, achieving that outlier male status, it all starts with building a rock-solid foundation.
Okay.
And that foundation is fitness. And, you know, when Sturmey talks about fitness, he's not just talking about, like, hitting the gym to look good, right?
It's deeper than that.
He's talking about building this foundation for everything else in life.
Yeah. He really seems to see it as like this essential ingredient in the recipe for success. Like it impacts your energy, your self-esteem, even how other people see you. It's pretty interesting.
And what I find interesting is he doesn't just tell you to, like, go to the gym. He has this whole system for achieving what he calls, like, the perfect male physique.
Yeah, he gets pretty specific about it, right? Like that whole thing about bulking up first and then getting super lean.
Exactly. Yeah. A year of bulking followed by 8 weeks of intense cutting to get down to that 10% body fat.
It's intense.
Yeah. And he's adamant about maintaining that low body fat percentage year round.
So it's like anything else worth having, right? Consistency is key.
Yeah. Exactly. You put in all that effort to get in shape. You want to keep it going.
Makes sense. But he goes beyond just the physical stuff too, right? Like he talks about body language.
Well, absolutely. How you carry yourself is huge.
Right.
Eye contact, speaking in a lower tone of voice, good posture, all these things that convey confidence and masculinity.
Yeah, he even has that whole section on how to like walk like a high-level man.
Right. Long strides, steady pace, shoulders back.
It's like he's giving you a master class in nonverbal communication.
It is. And he gets into some really interesting details, like how even small changes to your tonality can have a big impact.
Oh yeah, like how you use your voice.
Exactly. He encourages men to, like, slow down their speech, use a lower toned out, and ditch those ums and ahs that can make you sound unsure of yourself.
It's funny how we don't always think about those things, but they can make such a difference.
For sure, it's all about projecting that inner confidence.
So it's not just about how you look, it's about how you how you present yourself to the world.
Exactly. And speaking of, like, mastering yourself, this is where Sturmey gets into some topics that you might not hear about in your typical self-improvement advice.
Okay, like what?
He talks about things like semen retention and navigating porn addiction.
Yeah, he definitely goes there.
Which I think is really interesting because these are things that can have a huge impact on men's lives, but they're often kind of brushed under the rug.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So how does he approach those topics?
Well, with porn addiction, he talks about how it can really mess with your dopamine levels and basically sabotage your motivation.
It's that instant gratification cycle.
Exactly. And then he contrasts that with semen retention, which he presents as a way to boost energy, creativity, focus.
It's a practice that's been around forever, but it's often dismissed as like outdated or even harmful.
Right. But Sturmey argues that it can be a really powerful tool for men who are serious about maximizing their potential.
It's definitely a different perspective.
It is.
So it's about taking control of your sexual energy and channeling it in a more conscious way.
Exactly. And that idea of taking control, of being proactive, that leads right into his advice on financial risk taking.
Okay. How
He
so?
challenges that traditional play it safe mentality.
Which is interesting because we're often told to be financially responsible, right?
Right. But Sturmey argues that investing in yourself, even in unconventional ways, can yield much bigger rewards than just sticking with a secure job or focusing solely on paying off debt.
Yeah, I remember that example he gave about investing in Bitcoin instead of buying an engagement ring.
Yeah, pretty bold.
Definitely made me think,
He also questions the obsession with climbing the property ladder.
really?
Yeah, he argues that for a lot of people, it's more of a liability than an asset.
Interesting.
He suggests that investing that money in yourself, in your business, or even considering a high-risk, high-reward investment might be a better strategy for building long-term wealth.
So it's about being strategic with your resources and leveraging those early years when you have fewer responsibilities to maybe take some calculated risks.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm with him.
And all of this ties into Sturmey's perspective on relationships and the male timeline.
Okay, this is where he gets into that whole thing about age 27 being this pivotal time for men, right?
Exactly. He says that men often feel this pressure to conform to societal expectations at that age, get married, have kids, buy the house, even if it's not what they truly want.
He calls it the 9 years of destruction.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he argues that making those big life decisions based on external pressure rather than what you truly want can lead to a lot of regret down the line.
Yeah, it's like setting yourself up for a midlife crisis.
Totally.
So then how does he suggest men approach relationships?
Well, he challenges the whole concept of the one.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
He argues that relationships are often more about convenience and limited options than finding true love.
Okay.
And that men, especially younger men, should prioritize their own personal growth before committing to a serious relationship.
So that you're not just settling because of societal pressure or because you're afraid of being alone.
Yeah.
Makes sense. He also has some pretty unconventional views on cohabitation in marriage.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't shy away from controversy.
So, like, what does he say about those things?
He suggests that those arrangements often benefit women more than men.
Okay.
And he really encourages men to be cautious about entering into those commitments, especially before they've achieved a certain level of financial and personal success.
It's about being intentional with your choices,
Yeah.
not just drifting into something because it's expected.
Exactly. And all of this ties into his belief that a man's life really begins at 30.
It's like he's flipping the script on that whole idea that your best years are behind you once you hit that milestone.
Totally. He argues that men are actually in their prime physically and mentally from 30 to 50.
And he wants men to really embrace that.
Absolutely. To go after those big goals, build a life that feels truly fulfilling.
It's a really empowering message when you think about it.
It is.
It's like he's saying you have the power to create the life you want. You're not bound by these societal expectations or these timelines that other people might try to impose on you.
And I think that's what's so refreshing about Sturmey's perspective is that he's really challenging men to question everything.
To think for themselves and to create a life that's in alignment with their values and their goals, not just what they're told they should be doing.
Exactly. So as you're listening to this, think about what resonates with you. What parts of Sturmey's Outlier Male roadmap feel exciting or maybe even a little bit challenging?
Yeah. What do you want to explore further in your own life? And how can you start taking those small but consistent steps towards creating the life that you truly desire?
It's about taking control of your destiny and becoming the best possible version of yourself.
This has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me.